completely not true. Everything that you just heard there. Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro apparently really does not fundamentally understand, well, trade. This week, Trump threatened to impose escalating tariffs on Mexico unless the country somehow stops migration into the United States. And according to sources close to the White House, the mastermind behind the immigration tariffs was none other than Stephen Miller, of course. While the Treasury Secretary and the U.S. Trade Representatives both oppose the plan, but who listens to them? Join me now, Maria Teresa Kumar, CEO of Voto Latino, David K. Johnston, author of It's Even Worse Than You Think. David, I'm not an economist, David K. Johnston, but even I know that tariffs are a tax that's paid by the consumer. The idea that the person who's in charge of trade is pretending that the country of Mexico pays the tariffs that Donald Trump just imposed on us, what do you make of the fact that he's either lying about that or he genuinely doesn't know? Which is it?
Well, this is a good example of what one of my children said years ago, happy go magic land, where you just make things up. Certainly, if the Chinese government has a reduction in what they're selling to us, that has an impact. But, you know, he's completely, totally misleading the American public.
Can you just explain?
You and I and everybody else is going to pay.
Can you just explain what just to give us the very quick fundamentals?
Sure.
If Donald Trump levies tariffs on Mexico to punish them for somehow not stopping human migration, what will happen?
Well, tariffs are essentially a measure that discourages you from buying a foreign-made product or food or other item and buying a domestic one. And it also means domestic producers can increase their prices up to almost the level of the importer's price plus the tariff. And it is an important element in economic development for countries that are developing like we were, say, in the 1800s.
Right.
But it's a tax on you. And here's one of the reasons it's particularly horrible. We have these supply chains. We make parts in the United States for cars. We send them to Mexico to assemble them, which is a very low value-added enterprise. And then we bring the cars back to the United States. And to disrupt these supply chains is to disrupt American workers' jobs.
Yeah. And you know, and in states that are important. Maria Teresa, there's a piece that NBC News put out about are going to be impacted by this. And it says that border state Arizona gets about 40% of its imports from Mexico, the highest share of any state. About 38% of Michigan's imported products come from Mexico. A lot of that car parts. About 35% of Texas's imports are from our southern neighbor. Mexico is our largest trading partner. Punishing them economically punishes states that Donald Trump would probably like to get reelected in. What sense does this make in your mind? Is this literally just racial policy being litigated by people who don't understand economics?
No, they understand. So full disclosure, before Voto Latino, I actually did international trade agreements on the Hill. So I'm somewhat familiar with what they're doing. And basically what Donald Trump is, he's basically rolling the dice. This has very little to do with Mexico and immigrants. It has everything to basically go toe-to-toe with the Fed Chair Powell, saying, I want you to decrease interest rates so that I can get reelected, so that people can start buying homes again. But the problem is that by basically making us incredibly vulnerable to recessions, because if we were to hit a recession, Joy, we couldn't lower interest rates anymore and we couldn't lower our taxes anymore. But it's a short-term strategy for him to get reelected. But the problem is what happens. Not only do Americans bear the brunt of all of this, when you have Costco's CEO saying, hey, we actually provide some of the lowest prices in the world, we're not going to be able to do that under these scenarios. You're also sending a signal to our international trade partners saying you cannot trust Americans when it comes to trade agreements. What's happening right now, for example, with China? China said, okay, you're not going to buy our soybeans. You know who will? I mean, we can't buy soybeans from you. You know who will? The Brazilians. Now, the Brazilians are incredibly happy about that. When we all of a sudden remove the tariffs from the Chinese, do you think the Chinese are going to say, okay, we're going to go back and buy soybeans from you? You better believe not. That is basically, it's a hostile trading environment. And at the end of the day, these states that you mentioned are going to be incredibly vulnerable. But again, he is trying to play the short game, trying to decrease interest rates and trying to decrease the tax base, which he already has done. So it's up to the American people to say, we're not going to be hoodwinked. We're going to be very, very steady, and we're going to make sure that you actually are protecting the farmers, that you're protecting our auto industries, and they have to fight back.
And, you know, the thing about Donald Trump, and you would understand this having covered him for so long, David K. Johnston, is that he has this obsession with China and this obsession with Mexico being these foreign bad actors, these scary people that his base wants him to fight. And so you've got this policy emerging emerging not from his economics shop, but from his get the brown people out of the America shop, the Stephen Miller shop. And so in order to appease voters who mainly care about immigration more than anything else and the shift in the demographic balance of the United States, that's what they care about. It's what they vote on. Is it in Donald Trump's nature to literally undermine the farm economy and the import-export economy just to appease those people? And himself, I guess.
The only thing that matters to Donald Trump is Donald Trump. His policies aren't America first, they're Trump first. And he's hoping to hoodwink all those people who want to live in some mythical 1950s white America where, you know, black people didn't have any real civil rights and Asian people were hardly ever seen if you didn't live in California. And that's clearly, this is a racism mixed with 18th century mercantilist economics, because Donald Trump's assumption is there's only X amount of wealth in the world, and every dollar Donald Trump doesn't have or America doesn't have is a dollar somebody else has. That's not how economics works. We actually know how to create wealth. We're really good at it. But if you're a grifter like Trump, then no, you don't understand that. And all of these policies are, in fact, indeed, a bet. Can Donald Trump manipulate this economy and get himself a second term? He could lose the popular vote by 12 million votes and still get a second term if he wins the Electoral College.
Yeah, and Maria Teresa, you know, what a fortuitous booking. You got to know everything. I think you actually know everything. But can you just give us, in very quickly, dollars and cents terms, what will this mean, the impact economically for, let's say, a farmer or somebody who works in the auto industry? What is this actually going to do to them?
Well, right now, temporarily, the farmers are getting a bailout from Congress.
So are the Brazilians, by the way.
Right. But the auto industry is not. And the auto industry, sadly, is the one that has strongly struggled through the last 15 years. So he actually has to come up with a different type of policy of, like, how do you actually make them go back to work in a different sector? But let's be honest, one of the major reasons that we're seeing such migration from Central America is climate change. If Donald Trump had any curiosity of reviving our economy, he should really be talking about how do we start investing in renewable energy so that we actually stop the migration from the root cause.
Yeah, well, you know, he thinks that climate change is like a fairy tale. It's not real.
Because there's money to be made for folks that... So I just came back from Greenland. I know we're wrapping, but I just came back from Greenland. If the Arctic thaws, all of a sudden the Russians have navigational rights for the very first time to the oceans, and there's money to be made by exploiting minerals and oil.
How shocking that something Donald Trump wants helps Russia. How shocking. Yep. Maria Teresa Kumar, David, it's like a